that, I'd like to ask the others in the group what they think their organisation can bring to the 5 challenges and 5 decarbonisation, decentralisation, democratisation, digitalisation, deregulation. Where do you think your organisation can help in these challenges?
Okay, well, so I work for oil companies, so you might say, why am I here at a clean growth summit? Yeah, through several of the sessions, you've heard lots of people say this is such a big challenge for society. I think everyone agrees that we need to rise to it. There isn't a single solution. There's no magic silver bullet that says you just do this, and that's the key to decarbonisation. We need to be working all of these things. So the industry I work in, oil refining. Sorry?
Can you use the microphone?
Sure can. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
So the industry that I work in, oil refining, we provide products that we all use every day and have done for years. So obviously transportation fuels, plastics, cosmetics, medicines, and I could go on and on. And the world's going to continue to need those going forward. But we need to adapt as an industry. We're already starting to adapt as an industry to try and find ways to do it with less carbon intensity. And I think lots of the sessions today have talked about carbon capture, storage and reuse will be something that will have to happen at scale in our industry and many others if we're going to achieve our goal of decarbonising by 2050. Waste recycling, something that we're already doing. We actually process used cooking oil in the refinery, which is a waste product, and we make biofuels from it. Diversifying into different products. So about 5 years ago, we developed a market for our petroleum coke. The heavy fraction of the crude oil that would normally go to be burnt, we turn into a solid product. We developed a market for use in lithium-ion batteries. So contributing towards the electrification of the vehicle fleet. Right now it all goes to China. I think you see all major manufacturers now in the UK and other markets get out electric vehicles. Who's got an iPhone? It's got 5 grams of coke manufactured here in London. In it. So I think it's just ways that what's viewed as a traditional industry, we're adapting, and there's much more to come. I think waste recycling is a big thing. I think carbon capture, and these are large industrial organisations that contribute a lot to the local economy, make products that we all use every day. We're still going to need those products going forward. We've got to adapt and contribute our share towards a lower carbon society. The answer to decarbonisation is not that energy-intensive industries go away. It's that energy-intensive industries need to adapt to continue to provide what we need, but do it in a less carbon-intensive way.
Thank you. So, Laurie, the question was, what can we bring to the party? What can we do around here? I think in our organisation. So I guess what we've seen a massive change in the way that our customers, where they want to get their power from, or where customers want to hook their power up to our network. So in the last decade, we've seen the number of power producers connected to our network increase 4-fold, so it's gone up from 1 gigawatt to just over 4 gigawatts now, connected to the local network in this region. Just to give you an idea of scale, that's enough to power 2 million homes. We've now got connected to the local grid. Of course, it's not all about renewables. A lot of it is about, I think about 80% of it is low carbon, renewables and biomass. And the remainder is fossil fuels, which other parts play in peaking plant and using services like that. So we've seen a big change in what we already have done, and I guess net zero is all about just more, isn't it? In terms of either where we get our power from or how we use that power to use our home for businesses or provide our transport. So I guess what we're doing is we're investing a lot. A lot of what we invest today is maintaining the integrity of the system, because if we're going to utilise the system more, we need to keep it available. And keeping that sort of backbone, if you like, for people to use the delivery network for moving their power about is as important as ever. So we spend over £1 million a day on the system, and a large part of that is on refurbishing, maintaining, replacing assets based on that condition. And then we also invest in that in terms of capacity, bringing forward investment to make sure we can do more of this and get more use in the system. And I think the other thing I'd like to mention is just that we're forever looking out for customer use cases. So we don't just do this because we like to do it, or because we're in the habit of doing it. it's because we keep trying to remind ourselves we're here to serve our customers. So the question is, well, what's in it for the customer? Why does the customer need to use that? So we're looking for other use cases in terms of our investment and how we bring that forward. And so I'd agree with everything that Carl said in terms of both the imperative to do something. It's about decarbonisation and air quality, and of course we need to do that at least cost. But also we're looking at the whole resilience use case as well. So this is one that's come forward as well. So everything I just described up until now has really been about the sort of journey for decarbonisation and getting more decentralised, low carbon production of electricity out there. But we're now looking at a lot more resilience use cases. So we're looking in our innovation work, we're looking at how we can use storage on the system to make sure that we can maintain the resilience of communities, that if you lose an in-feed into an area, you can keep the lights on. If you've got solar panels, you've got batteries, you might be able to keep the power flowing. Also how we can bring power into that area to keep individual houses on. So using diesel generators, can use electric vehicles to do that, can bring power on. How can we provide customers with electric vehicle services so they can offset the cost of their motoring by providing vehicle to grid services, so investing in that. So all these different user cases that we're bringing forward. So there's a mix of, I guess, traditional things and looking to the future and thinking about how can we use these new technologies, which Carl talked about, how can we use them to provide more value to our customers?
Thanks, yeah. Just to add to what Darren said, obviously Darren is a customer of ours. We provide him with heat and power. So our aim is to decarbonise the power station and therefore decarbonise the heavy industry. But also, we're aware of the services that National Grid require and also Northern Power Grid. Wind is intermittent, solar is intermittent, therefore we need to have reliable, resilient power supplies that run on green energy. So that is where BPI are coming in and looking at decarbonising by conversion to hydrogen or post-combustion carbon capture and storage. I think it's interesting to hear about the data challenges. Having come from a previous industry where I worked in distributed generation, which like integrating battery technologies, reciprocating engines, open cycle gas turbines for the intermittency, data becomes a key driver for that change.
I've got one question. I've got one more question, and it's just about decentralisation. Do we really need a national grid? Please discuss.
Thank you. I think this concept of off-grid power is quite interesting. One of the challenges the government laid out that I have an interest in, we have an interest in, is it wants to develop an electric vehicle supply chain in the UK, and certainly the manufacture of lithium-ion batteries that we sell our coke into is a very energy-intensive process. And right now, you look at the UK national power prices, it wouldn't be a logical place to build that supply chain. So somehow, if we want to have an indigenous supply chain, I think there are some good arguments why you want to do that for the skill sets, security, the value add that you can bring. We have to find a way to leverage the fact the UK gets a high proportion of its power from renewable sources than many other competitor economies. So maybe that talks to a regionalised, if you want to encourage development in a certain region, this will be a good region to do that. The offshore wind power comes ashore, right at Killingworth, in fact. So I don't know how that will work, but to make some of these big scale investments in new industries, particularly EV supply chain, we're going to have to find a way of doing something like that. So that might talk to a regionalised structure for certain sectors that are strategic for the company, for the country.
Jim, you can give a fifth name if you like.
Yeah, so the grid, what use is that anyway? Discuss.
Well, we don't need the grids.
Yeah, so
loved it this morning.
yeah, of course, she's
I
being
should
cheeky.
mention Northern Power Grid's a major partner in the CC research project.
Well, it was until. Yeah, so I think, Carl touched upon it in terms of where do we get our power from, and if we think that the future, in all this uncertainty, political uncertainty, and things, where the UK energy policy at a high level has been quite clear and fixed for a period of time now, has been saying we'll get our power from low carbon sources. Increasingly, there'll be increasing low carbon sources, and that'll be nuclear and renewables. And of course, there's a big debate then about the cost and risk associated with Hinkley C, and indeed Hinkley, whatever the next one would be called. So that's a big open question. But just putting that to one side for a minute, the point is that there's going to be a lot of there's a need for bulk power in that national prescription, as well as renewables have come down. I described how a number of them are now connected to our local grid. So, and of course, sat where we are right now, as we look out to sea, this fantastic success story was talked about right at the head of the day about the price point coming down and the great thing to do for the communities around here and economic growth of this region in terms of the supply chain to take it all out there to the North Sea. Offshore wind is a great thing. So you need to get that power from out there to where customers need it. And that's what the grid is all about. And I think the other thing that the grid does, be that the national grid at the transmission level, or so you come down the system and you get to 132,000 volts, and that's where we pick it up. So we've got small pylons with poles and lots of cable in the ground, and national grid has the big marching pylons. All that infrastructure is just about getting the power to the people that need it and hooking people up. So the beauty of the grid, I suppose, is the way that is the power of diversity. So we build a grid, and we have assumptions about what the average use is of different people's power requirements and things, and it's a very efficient way to hook up people who've got power to people who need power, and it's a lot more efficient. You take it to the extreme, and you say, let's evaporate the grid and let's just all go self-supply. If you did that, then the cost would be astronomical. So it's I would say it's a great resource, and we need to make the most use of it, and I think we need it more than ever in this net zero time as we look to decarbonise and get the power back.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, you do. But I do think we have to. The question for me is the answer. So if you look at the electricity industry and how it's decarbonised over the last 10 years, brilliant progress. But actually, when you look at what they've done, they've just replaced big, dirty old stuff for clean, big stuff. Yeah. So and actually, there's not been a. And we're about to sort of plateau at the reduction in the energy, decarbonisation of energy. So I think if we want to go further down, you have to then do decentralised energy. And then the question is not, do you need a grid? The question is, what does that grid need to do? So I agree you need the wires. I think it's absolutely important, but it then becomes, instead of a top-down hierarchical thing, which it's historically been, I transmit to you, you give it to you, and that's it. We need to become a bi-directional. And that's going to create massive challenges. And I think one thing, that we shouldn't forget, 9th of August this year, when we had an outage, right, and that was, as a result of a relatively small outage on the grid, but as a result of the lack of intelligence in the grid to be able to respond. It did as it did, but it did as it was supposed to do with an old-fashioned view on networks. Now we need to get it to a new way of thinking. So yes, we need it, but perhaps it needs to look different in the future.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Carl said there, yeah, it is an old system. I think that's becoming evident with the issue that we had earlier on in the year. But I do think we need it, but in what vein is still to be understood, because I do think that the local area networks have got a big part to play, given the amount of generation that is now coming through you guys, as opposed to being generated onto the national grid 275 kV network. There's a lot more coming into the DNOs.
Thank you very much. And now, I'd now like to open up the questions to the audience, but I would encourage you, at least to start with, if we can take advantage of the expertise on the panel and try and focus on how to transport and store energy and efficiently. Now, to make this as inclusive as I can, I'm not just going to go to the first person who waves their hand, okay? So if you're a wee bit shy, please put your hand up. And also I'm going to take 2 or maybe 3 questions and then take them to the panel. So again, so the first person to put the hand up.
Thank you.
Please, can you say your name and where you're from?
Brendan Sweeney, Barrow & Furness in Cumbria. A question for Jim. We're going to need probably tens of millions of charging points for electric vehicles in residential areas on the streets, because even in a middle-class area like mine, there's cars parked at night in the street. Are you as an organisation going to put those in at the pavement edge? And a question for Carl. Are you using the skills you've got at Siemens in Ulverston, where you were leading on wet mating technology, to produce the tens of millions of connection points in the UK that can actually be buried in the curve edge so that we keep the spend in this country?
That's the first question. Anyone else? Someone's got a mic over there.
Ian Malley from Manchester Metropolitan University. So you asked the question about do we need the grid, but I wonder if you could extend that question. Do you need the gas grid and the electricity grid, and how do they work together?
So no wonder we've got rid of the gas grid. Anyone else? Any of a slightly different gender?
That's twice today, I think.
You shared a lot with us about decentralization, and you talked about it a lot from the perspective of energy generation and how that would impact the future of the grid. I was just wondering if there was any other aspect of decentralization that you feel is important that you'd like to share with us. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got 3, 4-ish kind of questions. One for Jim about the cars and how we can charge them. One from Carl on the skill set that we have on shore. Question of gas grids and power grids. Do we need either of them? Great question. And Rania was asking us about a little bit more about that. So,
yeah, shall I kick off first then in the order we got them? So I think the important thing with electric vehicle charging is to think about how society and how users are going to use electric vehicles. And I sort of view this in 2 kind of phases. We've got the sort of the model that we've got today, which is typical that people might have some personal transport, and they might lease it or they might buy it, but it's kind of personal to them. It's the classic model that they're using it 10% of the time, the other 90% of the time it sits there somewhere. And then we've got the other thing, which is the other sort of the brain teaser, which is, well, let's go into the Futurama world when it's autonomous vehicles and maybe you don't own a vehicle anymore. It's a sort of car club thing. You move her up the pod, and it appears at your door or something, and door pop up, Gullwing style or something, and then you pop and you get zoomed off somewhere, yeah? And maybe go through a hyperloop or something, whatever knows. So, but we've got to think about it in those 2 kind of worlds, I think. And I think your question was more about the first world. But in terms of that first world, I think that I've just described there. So in that sort of first scenario, we think there's a lot of value here in terms of smart charging. So in a world where you have a vehicle and use of a vehicle, it's your kind of your private thing. I think having the ability to be able to have it plugged in quite a lot is a good thing, because then you can use smart charging, and then you can soak up the wind when the wind blows, or soak the sun, harvest the sun. So this is a world where, moving forward, energy systems, we want a world where we don't constrain off renewable generators. You've got 0 marginal cost generation. You want to use it, particularly if it's 0 marginal cost and 0 carbon, double wing. You should be using that, and you can see models where if you keep things plugged in, then you can actually offset the cost of the motoring a lot. Even before you're ignoring vehicle to grid for a minute, that's just about when you take the electricity, let alone give it back. So at that point, you go, well, that's great. And I come back to your question, which is, yes, but I live in a terraced house, I don't have a private driveway, and I've got a street light outside. I mean, there's all sorts of challenges there, isn't there? There's societal challenges, there's tripping hazard challenges. Where's that street light? Is it now, because we've started putting it next to the house, not next to the road, in terms of planning standards and just, for those fans of 1980s sitcoms and sort of bred when Joey in Liverpool got out his cone, put it outside his house, yeah? It used to be a deserted house in a red brick terrace street. Well, that's all very well there, but nowadays, actually, most of the houses have got loads of cars, and everyone's competing for a parking space, and that's the one with the charging. So you can see all sorts of. So I don't know what the answer is, quite frankly, to the charging question in a lamppost, but I see all sorts of barriers to that. Personally, I can potentially see more value if you can come up with a model where you've got more sort of different charging options for customers in that situation. But I think we as electricity company would say we'll, as society and customers decide what they want, they'll come to us and we'll work out how best to service their needs. That's a bit of a cop-out, so I've given you a clue to where my sort of head is, but there's all sorts of issues I think still there.
Yeah, I'll answer that question as well. Actually, first, just because we've actually been working with Transport for London and doing exactly that with a partner, so a partner called Ubertricity, where we've been putting charging posts on the lampposts in central London. So it is possible. It's really complicated, and again, you've got to have what do London have that most regions and cities don't have? It's Transport for London. Yeah, they've got a coordinating body. So they could do it.
Could you say money?
Oh, and money, yes. The other question, which was quite a specific question, and everybody in the room wonders what wet mating is, right? But I have to say, don't worry, it's electrical connections, it's plugging high voltage, 45 kV actually, really interestingly, subsea cables underneath water, plugging and unplugging live. And interesting enough, I know that business very well. I know Mike Henry, who's the MD, very well there, and I've visited it on numerous times. They have gone through challenges, and one of the challenges they had was because they're so tied to the oil and gas industry and the peaks and troughs of that. Actually, one of the programs they have is looking at how they can use that unique expertise they have in other areas. So I hadn't thought what you had, but I've mentally written it down and I'm going to speak to them about it. So thank you for that. Thank you. Back to you for the gas network, because I ain't answering that.
Thanks, Ian. Nice to see you again. Yeah, I guess so. The question, so we should be thinking about energy systems, not electricity systems or gas systems. I guess that's at the heart of your question. And so the kind of project at Kiel, which Carl talked about, and some of the projects that we're working at with Laura and the people at the Centre for Energy Systems Integration and Northern Gas Networks are just along those kind of lines, where we're looking to see what can the value of both grids be and how can they work together, I suppose, to support this low carbon transition. Because we wouldn't, I've given my best case for the electricity grid, and somebody from a gas grid can give their best case. And I guess the guys from the gas grid, if they were here represented, might say, well, hydrogen's a big, how are you going to get the hydrogen there? If hydrogen can be part of the solution for decarbonising heat, how are you going to get it there? How are you going to get it to the source where it's needed? And that's why the use cases going through at the moment are looking at how hydrogen can be safely transported and get the energy through the throughput that you need to service people's heating needs through the existing gas grid. But yeah, you need to be thinking of both of them and think about which solution fits which solution best and how can we use together rather than isolation.
And we had a question from Ray.
Was it for Carl?
What was your question again? It was for Carl.
You asked a question about decentralised energy, and I focused on generation, and indeed I have. But of course, storage is really, really important. So to get that balance across, so an integrated system, the microgrid to be able to do the intelligence, but also actually what we've really been working on finding is how people interact with the system. So it's giving people data so that they can understand and make wise decisions as well. And so I think it's the whole system approach to decentralised energy results in adoption. I'm just to tell this story because it does make me laugh, and it does age me, unfortunately. I remember Economy 7, right? So you can give electricity away free, right? But if it's awkward and difficult to use, nobody will use it, right? So the fact that you had to get up in the middle of the night to switch your washing machine on at 2 in the morning, it was going to be free. Nobody did it. So you have to think about how people use the system, and that's a real important topic when you're developing decentralised systems and how people are going to engage with it. So thank you for the question.
Heron from the northeast. That's right, yes. I'm on your fire. Question. Technically, I can take my electric car to work, I can fill her up with electricity, take her home, plug it into the neighbour's house, the neighbour can buy the electricity, run his house off my car, while I run my car off the solar panels using the second life battery. So what level of chaos can the grid take before it becomes a problem? Because nobody knows what will be happening when 30 million have got this option.
Any other questions? We'll take one more because 3 just blew a minute. Say who you are first.
Andy Brooks, Lincolnshire County Council and Greater Lincolnshire. I just wanted to ask the panel whether they thought there was any differences in the approach you might take for a city or a metropolitan model of energy and systems and storage versus a rural one, and whether they thought that local energy networks would be more or less important based on your decisions.
Okay, shall we stop there? So the first question was from Colin on how much chaos can we live with? And the second question was on city versus rural. I'll ask, can we ask everyone to give their thoughts on that?
Yeah, shall I go for holding the mic? So shall I go? Yeah, so let's start with Colin's impish, mischievous, twinkling his eye question about chaos. Yeah, so I talked about diversity earlier and the fact that there's a well-established principle that as network operators, we size the network and run the network based on assumptions about how customers will use their energy, electricity. This is the gas guys can speak for themselves, but from an electricity perspective, this is the electricity network, how we do it. And we size the network for peak use, but we don't assume that everyone's going to use the maximum capability of their electricity wire, if you like. So most of you in your homes could probably take about 18 kilowatts through your fuse before your fuse might start complaining. It's the fuse that you're cut out inside your house. But we typically assume that when you're a population, so a street of you, that you'll only use a kilowatt, because people are people and people don't all use their power shower at exactly the same time, or maybe in the future charge their electric vehicle or use their second life battery or whatever they're going to start doing at exactly the same time. So this is a question about diversity assumptions, because that means that we can then build a grid that's, if we built it for the maximum size that you are contractually entitled to, if you like, or if the assets servicing your particular house can do, then we build it 10 times bigger than it, at least than it is at the moment, and you'd all pay for the privilege of that, and it's sit there nice and cold, hardly ever used. Yeah. So we're always trying to strike that balance between making sure we've got the size of the network right for the uses we've got today. And I guess that's why we spend a lot of our time thinking about how these new energy practices, as social scientists or anthropologists would talk about it, how they would affect people's use of electricity, and therefore how we need to reflect that in how we design, build and operate the grids, so that we service you. And there's that Goldilocks principle, it's just right, it's just the right size. You're not building for something, you're not paying for something that's wasteful. And then, so I guess we've got some of the questions about some of the ways that the way it might transpire. And this is why demonstration projects have been so vital to do that. So we've run projects with hundreds of heat pumps in it, hundreds of electric vehicle charging points, seeing how people use these things. So that then gives us an idea, particularly when those are new technologies, and you described a couple of them, Colin. We've had one working in Barnsley where we've been working with a housing association with people with domestic scale batteries in combination with solar panels, and thinking about how they use them and how they use them, if they can operate them to minimise their electricity bills, which seems like a good reason to use their low carbon devices to do that. It's a good idea, capture the sun, but what that does to the impact on the grid, if you like. So just that point, about new patterns of use. I wouldn't call it chaos, but I call it new patterns of use. And then chaos, if you like. But that gives us then a clue as to how to develop our policies and how to move forward with that. So I guess that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to demonstrate these things, make sensible assumptions, and make sure also that we've got ideas where we can see things that we might need to react more quickly. And one of the things we're doing there is thinking about how we can use customer flexibility, or even some other sort of fuse technologies, that if people move quicker than we think, and we've got to get in there and say put some bigger cables in or something, or see how we can use maybe customer flexibility options to limit that while it gives us time to go in and dig up the road, or something more invasive, if you like. So it's kind of a combination of things, but we're trying to forever look ahead, work with our customers, spot things that need doing so we can move forward. There was a second question, Laura, do you want to keep going?
No, give someone else the mic and we'll come back to you.
The rural versus urban.
That was the second question.
I'm not sure how I would answer that. Maybe it's a challenge. I live in Lincolnshire. We're in Lincolnshire and you drive a Tesla, the nearest place you can charge in a supercharger, I think, is Grantham or Sheffield. Ain't much good to you if you live in Louth like I do. So I think there are challenges, which is why I think the solution to decarbonisation it's wide ranging. Electric vehicles, no doubt, have a big role to play. Maybe they don't suit every circumstance. Maybe in some rural locations, you still like driving diesel, agricultural machinery. A lot of talk about industrial clusters. We've got to have people near to cluster with. That could be a challenge in rural locations. It's that critical mass of people and industries that make some of these schemes viable. So I think, probably haven't answered your question. I kind of agree with you. I think it's a challenge. It's why I think they can't say, oh, okay, this is going to work, it's going to work everywhere, because I think different solutions work in different ways. One of the huge challenges of decarbonisation, people tend to think of power generation, industry, transport, all of which contribute. Agriculture is a huge, cows produce greenhouse gases, just say. So there's a big challenge. So I think it's such a huge, I sort of liken it, the challenge of decarbonising by 2050 is a bit like putting a person on the moon, only more so. And that's the sort of scale of challenge for society in figuring out how we do this or how we move that way. And there isn't one single answer.
So the question was about how much chaos can we take?
So I have to answer them the other way around, if that's okay, because I just echo that was a great answer. And the answer is there is no, every solution is different. Somebody asked me before about wouldn't it be great? So decentralised energy, you just design it once and it's cookie cutter across the UK. Well, it's not. So I think it really is horses for courses, and the variety that we are starting to see is mind-boggling. And one of our tasks as a manufacturer is how do you constrain that, because uniqueness is expensive. It's nice, but it's not cheap. So that's that. And the chaos on the network, I think that again, Jim answered that. The bit I would add to that is it's about intelligence in the network. We generally have a dumb network. Not that I don't take that personally, but generally our network was, as I mentioned before, it was unidirectional. It was non-intelligent. We now need to deal with that problem really effectively. It will be about how can we get intelligence very at the grid edge, right close to where you're using it, to be able to see that that's happening and be able to respond to it.
Yeah, so Andrew, back to your point about rural, I agree with these guys. It's not a cookie cutter approach. I think that everything needs to be taken in context. Obviously, big cities versus rural locations have different challenges. I know we've talked about biofuel, biodiesels, etc., which could be used in those environments. Down to the chaos question, exactly. I think it's around data capture and using that intelligent data analytics to be able to prevent the chaos of recharging and using that solar panels are generating. It's nothing different to, obviously, in the power industry, of moving away from base load generation to peak demand, peak lopping, battery technologies that are operating in enhanced frequency response, responding to in 300 milliseconds to spikes in frequency. And all of that's capable at the level that the CHPs are operating at, but what we need to do is bring that down to the levels that customers are interfacing with it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on that question? I'm very conscious that we're heading towards 5 o'clock.
Can I just add one more thing on the chaos thing? I should have mentioned that I think the other way we deal with this is there's this concept of sort of least worst regrets or low regrets, or what could I not be wrong for doing? Another way of sort of putting it. And I guess one of the things that we're doing is we've got an £83 million programme at the moment. We're running over 8 years, which is upgrading at the grid edge. So back to this point about upgrading our digitalisation in our substations, such that we just have more information, we know what's going on there, and we've got more sort of control capability. Because the point is, regardless of what these new ways, customer energy practices, we can't be wrong for thinking we're going to need to have more control capability at those things. So we're not doing it to all of our 45,000 distribution substations. We build a local one, the street corner one, the one we built, one we building here. But we've picked about 1,000 in sort of locations that we think might be useful. But we can actually cookie cutter them if just on that specific, not on everything, but on that if we need to. If there's an electric vehicle cluster that grows up in your street corner, or somebody with some inventive second life battery use, and we go, oh, we need some more control in that street location, then we can go and install it. We've got a proven cookie cutter technique that we can say just one more over there, and then we can use some clever voltage regulation or some other smart control potentially to manage the effect of that at least cost for our customers. So it's kind of a point of sort of low regrets, and that's helping us to future-proof a number of our locations, but having some in our back pocket proven solutions that are not demonstration. These are now, so one of Carl's points from earlier in the day, these allow us to go at scale if and when we need to. And as electric vehicles take off, which we still expect them to, we haven't seen the hockey stick yet, but it means we can move quite fleet of foot to go and smarten up some of that and increase the digitalisation.
So, we're going to finish up now. We've got one question, and she's a friend of mine, so I want to ask her. And give it. We've got the name first.
Cheers. Okay, thanks very much. It's Lizzie Lunn from the North Tyne Combined Authority. So we've talked a lot about decarbonising the system, but my question is, the UK, I think, produces about 2% of global emissions, and we've just heard today that the US is pulling out. So what are we doing to ensure that we are assessing the risks of climate change on our energy systems, and also and making sure that they're prepared for future-proofing, as you said before? And also, what do you think is UK companies' responsibility in terms of encouraging other countries to do what we're doing and decarbonise the system?
Okay, so it's a question of resilience, I guess.
Well, speaking as someone who works for a US company, looking at just the US, the US speaks with many voices. Certainly at the national level, the Trump administration has been very sceptical of climate change and from that Paris Accord. A lot of US environmental legislation, particularly at state level, and many of the states, particularly California, but also the Northeast, New England, are actually pretty much more aligned with European authorities. And there's a kind of tug of war going on between the central administration and the state administration. I would say, US companies, certainly including my own, are, to be fair, probably behind where a lot of European majors have been. But the conversations are starting to change. I think most people accept climate change is a thing, and we need to do something about it. So I think there are some differences. It's a global problem. I'll perhaps let somebody else answer the resilience issue, which I think is important, but I don't think I'm necessarily the best qualified to comment on.
How is the Humber preparing for potential rising?
Well, certainly, I'm sitting on the board of the Humber LEP, and there's lots of flood alleviation that the PAWL scheme's gone in. The Humber is, I think, the second most flood-prone region in the UK after the Thames Estuary. Some of you may have heard of the Waterline campaign. That's trying to really very much align with what we heard today about the Humber becoming a living laboratory, demonstrate decarbonisation at scale. Because obviously we have a vested interest living in the Humber region. We have to live with the effects of rising sea levels and floods and all that. But it truly is a global problem. Because the risk to the UK is if we go our own path and develop technologies and become a world leader in decarbonisation, that's fantastic and it presents a huge opportunity. But if no one else does it, there's only one climate. And if developing countries, the US, other economies in the world don't get on board and we all treat it as it's a world problem. So it's not something the UK can work in isolation. I think the UK is and can continue to be a world leader, and that can be a huge economic opportunity for the UK, but we have to bring others with us. And leave that to the politicians. And we're all doing this.
I'm mindful of time, so maybe just 1 minute each, maybe of how your companies are getting ready for.
Very quickly then, we're also US owned, and we operate in 10 US states and 1 state in Canada, and echo what you said there. That's certainly my experience as well. Very state run and other very aware people. And I think on the practical thing that we're doing in adaptation, to climate change is that we're spending a lot of money and a lot of time on looking at flood resilience to our substations. So also resilience is an issue where you get inter-resilience between systems. It's about energy systems. So we're very aware that our system then can affect the water system, be that clean or dirty water. If Northumbrian Water or Yorkshire Water lose their supplies, because it's our grid that goes down, and then we get some cascade. In the same way in the large national power cut on August the 9th, we saw issues with not just with our grid, but then with trains, and then you get transport going down, and then you've got other issues, and government asking some quite intelligent questions, I think, there about not just about did the old system work well, but what should the new system look like, and should we be thinking about resilience beyond just regulated entities, regulated networks, and power companies, but into what's the obligations of train companies to have resettable trains, for example, or electric vehicle charging points to make sure they stay up. Because if everyone's relying on them, they don't want to just decide to turn them off, or that sort of thing. So it's a good question.
So I think we operate in 170 countries, and we're bringing a lot of those. So I think we have a moral obligation to have a voice. I think it's the best way of having success with that voice is to lead by doing. So we have to do it. We have to be serious about doing it, and then we have to use our voices to encourage other countries to come on. There's no answer, because what's the alternative would be my sort of, I'm not giving up yet, right? So I'm not ready to roll over, and I think we've got to give it our best. Actually, I think it's a great opportunity for us to then go and sell it to everybody. Sell our competency, tell them how to do it, and charge them a premium for it if that's okay.
Yeah, so the parent company of EPI is actually worldwide, so they operate in multiple countries. They have just invested in a large-scale onshore wind farm in Eastern Europe. So that's something that they're taking, overseas. Regarding the resilience side of things, obviously we're looking to convert the existing power plant to run on a carbon neutral fuel source, and that will maintain resilience both to down refinery and also to the national grid network.
You like that?
Excellent.
I mean, with that power interruption on August 9th, the refinery in Wales shut down for a week. So when the power interruption on August 9th, the refinery in Pembroke, Wales shut down. I think part of it was down for a week as a result of that. So it's an example of how an impact on one part of the energy network can basically affect, I guess, 20% of the UK's fuel supply.
Well,
A bit of information with that question.
really short time.
Just a very brief comment. You're talking about leading by example. The African Union has just formed in a relationship with the N8 universities in the UK, or the N8 universities. Whole university is doing a side-by-side agreement with them. And there's a big opportunity there for all of this for outreach. 55 countries, 1.25 billion people, 600 million with no access to electricity at all, and they're doubling that. So that's a very real setup. It's going to be announced at Chatham House early next year, and some opportunities for outreach.
Thank you for that. I'll just ask you all to thank the panel in the traditional way.